On today's episode, we'll be covering Xenosaga 2-3, A Missing Year, a Flash video series that was released on Namco's Japanese website around 2005 to 2006. The story begins with Jin Uzuki investigating Gnosis Terrorism, a new phenomenon in which Gnosis under a person's control attack high population centers. He finds a mysterious young Realian girl being taken care of by the Subcommittee on Close Encounters and Juli Mizrahi. The Subcommittee lab is attacked, and an agent named Doctus, who was sent by an anti-UMN organization called Scientia, kidnaps the young Realian girl. Jin and Shion pursue Doctus to a Scientia vessel and are caught. The captain of the vessel attempts to explain the situation to them, revealing the dangers of the UMN and Vector's role in funding the research that led to the events on Miltia 14 years ago. As Scientia conducts an analysis on the Realian girl, a power awakens in her, and Shion is rendered unconscious as the Realian disappears from the lab. Jin works with Doctus to conduct an encephalon dive into ARS Nova, a top-secret area of the UMN sealed by Vector. There, Jin confronts Grimoire Verum, the father of Nephilim, and the orchestrator behind the recent Gnosis attacks. Grimoire attempts to use the Realian as a vessel for his daughter's consciousness, but the Realian girl rejects her memories, and the Song of Nephilim turns her into a Gnosis. Grimoire's consciousness is destroyed, but Shion is able to help the Realian regain her memories, calling her by her true name, Almadel. It's revealed that Shion's father had experimented on Almadel, and Shion had befriended her and tried to comfort her in her distress. This also unlocks repressed memories for Shion. Almadel then realizes that she must sacrifice herself to stop the Song of Nephilim from resonating throughout the universe. Shion has an emotional breakdown in response, but is roused and comforted by Jin. As a result of this incident, Shion is demoted within Vector, but due to her conflicted feelings about Vector's involvement in all of this and their attempted cover-up, she leaves Vector without saying goodbye to KOS-MOS and joins Scientia. All right, before we really get into this, I wanted to get your opinion overall on this little Xenosaga episode. This missing year. What do we even call this? We call this a
it's
Flash
not a game.
Video series.
Yeah, Flash. They said it was like a Flash series. It's fine. I liked it. Once again, it's not what I was expecting at all. Just like with Pied Piper, it's very different from what I was thinking the game would be, or what this media piece would be. All in all, I liked it. I liked the story. If we're just looking at the story itself, I thought the story was fascinating. It was plenty captivating. Once again, which is very typical of the Xeno games, I found myself quite lost, and being very glad that it kept summing up each scene afterwards.
Yeah, when it was over.
And then at the very end, it sums up the whole game. And it's like, hey, this is what happened. This is what you watched. I needed that because just with the still images and very little animation, it was difficult for me to tell exactly what was happening, especially when multiple characters were involved. And, maybe like that girl, all of a sudden she's like being raised up into the air and it's like something's happening to her. And I'm like, what's happening? And then it just tells me in the text. So
right.
I appreciated that. The story on itself, I thought was fascinating, and I actually thought it was really good. I really liked it.
Yeah, this is clarifying my overall thoughts. I would say mostly on Xenosaga, because I don't feel like I had this problem to nearly the same degree in Xenogears as I did here. But I just started a playthrough of Xenoblade. I don't know if you've seen that. I've been posting about that on Twitter and stuff like that. So now that we're getting to the end of this sort of Xenosaga trilogy analysis, I got, curious to kind of fire up Xenoblade Chronicles again and just sort of get started on recording footage for that so that I could put together, say, the sections we should play through on each episode and create a little movie for people to watch who want to follow along who don't have the game. Cool. A playlist that people could follow along with us. That's something I'm thinking about doing, moving forward on the games we cover. But anyway, as I'm doing this, the Xenoblade Chronicles is not xenotypical in this way.
Oh, it's not. Oh, good.
It is
good and bad, mostly good.
No, in a good way in this respect.
Okay.
You can fire up the game and you start playing it, and you are not lost at all. you understand what is happening. You understand who the characters are. There's not all of this like terminology just like hanging over you. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. And so I was simultaneously playing that. And then I did this missing year chapter, and I was immediately, again, just like in Xenosaga 2 and in Pied Piper, opening up wiki articles and like, what the fetch is this? What is this? What are they talking about? I do think that this is a problem overall with, I want to like specify the Xenosaga trilogy even more so than Xenogears. I really feel like this is not one of those gradual sort of hills of world building where you just sort of you're walking at this really nice soft incline and like learning the world. It's like you're immediately like vertical climbing of a gigantic mountain to try to like understand what's going on here. And so,
and you know, for some people that's great, but you're severely limiting the reach of your media when you do that.
Yeah. And I mean, that was true even though we had just done Pied Piper, we had just done Xenosaga Episode 2, and I had just done an entire refresh on the first game. Even having all of that in mind, it's all fresh. I was still like finding myself stopping, like pausing the video, right? Because in order to find this was a Japanese only Flash video thing that has been fan translated, and now they have that in a playlist on YouTube, right?
Right.
So, but I'm pausing the thing all the time to like reread that section and try to understand what it's saying. It's
very much so.
It's not even just that it's dense with terminology. It is, it feels obtuse in the way it is written almost.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's like, okay, that was done on purpose and it's just like the style for this particular series, or if it's something that maybe they reconsidered moving into Xenoblade. But I gotta say, like, I feel like Xenoblade, because there's already some things I'm seeing here that are like, oh, I know what that is. Oh, I know what that is, that I would have never known, because Xenoblade was my first Xeno game, right? So the first time I played that,
of course.
I would have had no idea what the monad is. I would have no idea what the Zohar is. Like, I wouldn't have been able to see references like that. Yet, it's just so much easier to like get into it and follow it. And I don't know. I feel like the writing and storytelling gets, I want to avoid the word stronger, but that's how I feel. But I guess to put it more objectively, just it has that really easy incline getting into its more difficult stuff at the end, like the more high level philosophical, sci-fi stuff at the end, but it leads you into that in a really gradual way. And in this game, anyway, I'm going a little longer on this than I wanted to. Point is, I was really confused too, and so it was funny that they kind of, like you said, they summarized like each little section for you, like make sure that you're following along.
It was very helpful, because I was doing the same thing as you. I was pausing and I was like, oh, what's going on here? But once I kind of got the flow of how they were doing this, and that, okay, a recap is coming, it's okay, they're going to tell me, I was able to enjoy it a lot more and kind of just be able to watch it without pausing and making sure I understood it right then in that moment, because I knew that it was coming. So I did not enjoy so much the first couple parts, but the last several parts I really enjoyed, because I was able to just kind of let it flow.
Yeah, another thing that I think was unique, I don't even know if there's multiple playlists of this on YouTube, but as you're going through it, right, as you're watching the story, you can stop to like click on certain terms, and you get like definitions for what those terms are.
Oh, so, I did see that, occasionally.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the particular playlist I was watching, the guy was quite often going into those terms and having them defined. So it's like the story's getting interrupted like very frequently to get like essentially a database entry, like encyclopedia paragraph, like telling you what this organization is or whatever. And so it felt really slow. It felt bogged down. But like as it goes on and as those terms are now defined and he kind of just lets it play, it starts to get a little smoother, the experience.
Okay.
So that's probably something people should,
and
keep in mind.
I became really grounded because just like if Shion was confused that there was another Nephilim, I was double confused at what exactly was going on.
But
once I understood, once
or
it was explained a little bit, like this is this is why she thinks she's Nephilim and all that. Like, okay, fine. Once I understood the space and the characters and the temporal aspects, once I got that, it was smooth sailing. It really was. It just took a while for me to get that.
Yeah, it was like, Anyway, I don't want to like hammer on and on and on about it. I think we've gone on enough about that. But
very nice.
Yes, was I surprised that there's a second Nephilim? No. Was I just as confused as ever? Yes, is essentially what I was getting.
That sounds about right. It was mysterious. It really was, because I was like, who is this? This could be somebody. Oh, I see. Okay. Once those few questions were answered, it was good.
Yeah.
I have to throw in this, by the way, looking this stuff up, because this is wild. A lot of this just goes back to Xenogears. But the name Almadel, Almadel comes from the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Yes, I was about to get into all the Lesser Key of Solomon stuff, because there's a lot of references
because the Lesser Key of Solomon is also called the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis.
Yes.
And that's just
there's a ton of references to the Lesser Key of Solomon in this, like a ton of names. So there's a lot of that to get into.
Good.
So basically, I guess like this is what I like to do for stuff that's super dense like this. I like to just break it down in the simplest way possible. The gist of what you are supposed to get from this story is that Shion learns through the course of this, oh no, Vector, the company I work for, is involved in all of this shady stuff. What a huge surprise. Uh-oh.
To her, it really was.
For some reason at this point.
Yes.
And she learns, she regains some of her memories from the event 14 years ago on Miltia. Right?
Yeah, that's right. This is actually a really important story, I think. Well, I don't know. I haven't played Xenosaga 3 yet, but like, this seems like pretty important puzzle right here. Piece.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be the same. Well, I mean, it's a little bit more obvious because the story is literally titled Xenosaga 2-3. So it is supposed to fill you in on this year that happens in between 2 and 3. And I mean, I'm at the beginning of Xenosaga 3, she's no longer with Vector. I'm sure that would be very confusing if you weren't filled in on what happened in this event. It's actually super key. But also, she remembers, some of her repressed memories from Miltia 14 years ago. So she had known this Realian girl, a special Realian that was being experimented on there. And this is a very similar story to Yoki Mizrahi and Momo, right? So Yoki Mizrahi built Momo, the Realian, to house his daughter's consciousness. That was like the original intention. Right. There's this other guy, Grimoire Verum, from back in Lost Jerusalem time, who had essentially wanted to do the same thing with this Realian girl, this special Realian girl we meet in this little episode. Her name is Almadel. We don't learn that till the end. But essentially, he wanted to put Nephilim, who is the girl Nephilim we've known in all the visions from the earlier
was his real
episodes.
Daughter, right?
Yes, that was this guy's real daughter who died, and he wanted to put her consciousness into this Realian. So there were a bunch of tests being run and things like that. Things went crazy on Miltia, but Shion had befriended this girl. And so now in this episode, this Realian girl, Almadel, is kidnapped by Scientia, who is the anti-UMN organization that we learned about from Pied Piper. and Melissa was the one who started that organization. They kidnap her, right? And then end up helping Jin and Shion in this encephalon dive to learn what I've basically just explained. And essentially this is a moment where Shion is beginning to remember some of her past. I think those are like the main takeaways, the main important things to know, the gist as far as what you should take away from this story. And at the end of it, Shion leaves Vector, and now she's working with Scientia.
Yes, but in order to leave Vector, she also had to leave KOS-MOS.
Yes.
So KOS-MOS is still part of Vector. Partly it's almost like she was forced out, though, because throughout the course of the story, she kind of takes some action against Vector, and for that gets demoted. And she loses access to KOS-MOS. Well, most of her access she loses to KOS-MOS anyways. And so then she decides, well, I'm just going to call it quits then.
So I don't know whether I should consider this a strike 3 as far as Vector is concerned, because I don't know how she wasn't fired for, first of all, not asking to take all of that gear over to like Momo's encephalon dive from the second game, right? Like, she tells Alan, go gather the stuff, and we're going. And he's like, you're not even going to ask permission to take all of this like extremely expensive equipment over? And she's like, no, we're going to go help Momo, right? It's like, okay, I guess she wouldn't have been demoted for that. Okay, what about stealing this extremely special ES unit and like trying to fly into the space-time anomaly to reach Miltia by herself with Alan? There was no discipline for this either. So this is what it took finally for Vector not to fire her, but just demote her. I mean, I guess they do sort of allude there at the end how she still has some access to KOS-MOS. It's like she's really important as far as the KOS-MOS project goes. So it's like they
and that's
feel
kind of my thing, that whatever Wilhelm, whatever he's got thinking about, he needs Shion, is what I've kind of come to, especially with the end of Xenosaga Episode 1 and how Shion has something to do with the Y data access to, old Jerusalem or Miltia. And then the fact that she has made all these mistakes and he's letting her go on makes it sound to me like he's kind of just using her and he needs her. But then with this, apparently she's disposable now. He lets her go. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So that's the only thing I can think of for why she wouldn't have been fired or / imprisoned for the things that she has done. But she must just be really important to this KOS-MOS project. Okay. So now that we've gone through all of that stuff, right? I like this. I like how they've brought the Gnosis back. I kind of mentioned in our Xenosaga Episode 2 series that at first, before I kind of realized what this portion of the story was originally meant to be, which was the end of Xenosaga Episode 1, I was getting very like confused about how the Gnosis are not being brought into this story like at all. It's like the Gnosis,
exactly.
They're mentioned briefly by the guy at Vector, Les Grossman guy. They're mentioned briefly there, where he's like, we have an exponential increase in Gnosis attacks that's going to wipe us out in a certain number of years, right? And that's almost the only mention that the Gnosis get in the whole game. So it was nice.
Kind of weird.
They just kind of were like not a factor in Episode 2. So it was kind of nice to see how they're brought back here. It's not in a way that I expected, but it kind of pleasantly surprised me. They're being used in terrorist attacks. So they suspect a person is controlling these Gnosis attacks on these, population centers. Someone from within the UMN, right? And this is all kind of tied back to what the experimentation was that was going on Miltia 14 years ago and what led to the emergence of the Gnosis in the first place. And so that we're starting to kind of get back into that mystery, which I liked. So,
like this is the third game where they are touching on that exact event.
I know.
And we still don't know exactly what happened.
We know a little bit more about, like, specifically the what are they called?
Song of Nephilim.
Well, the Song of Nephilim, but I'm
Oh, the
thinking
URTVs?
yeah, the URTVs.
Yeah.
We know a little bit more about what they were all about, but not still so much about Joachim Mizrahi's research and what they were doing with the Zohar and all of that. And I expect that is what's going to be leading into how the Gnosis emerged, the sort of contact with the higher number dimension and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I kind of liked that this starts off right away with bringing us back into that. So it says, during this time, the Gnosis threat intensified and expanded its range, bringing about heavy damage to some of the planets in the Federation. I also think that this time I began to feel as if the Gnosis threat was someone else's duty. Then 6 months later, I learned that my brother Jin, whom I had said farewell to at the spaceport, had been commissioned by the Contact Subcommittee to investigate the Gnosis attack incidents. From the Contact Subcommittee's inquiry into the Gnosis attack incidents, so this is an entry from that. At the present time, there has been no correlation discovered in the numerous attacks. However, several mysterious factors regarding the Gnosis activities have been discovered. The attacks are focused on highly populated urban centers, giving rise to the possibility that the Gnosis are targeting civilians. There's a consistent pattern in the attacks, which leads us to believe that the Gnosis focus is not simply destruction. Within a set time frame following the attacks, all the Gnosis completely disappear. In consideration of these facts, we have determined that the Gnosis are acting as if they are being controlled by someone. In addition, at the latest attack incident, we confirmed the presence of a mysterious boy who is presumably acting together with the Gnosis, and a 100 series Realian that he Gnosified. The boy's words lead us to believe that a character called Grimoire may be deeply connected to this case. Though the hypothesis seems far-fetched, if we confirm the existence of a leader who commands the Gnosis, it will give us the breakthrough that we need. That was not what I was expecting. I was not expecting the story to be going in a direction where the Gnosis are literally being controlled by a person. Did you have any feelings on that?
No, I don't. That's, gosh. I don't have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how I feel about it either, because I guess the way they were introduced, it felt like this higher dimensional force that was like something beyond our understanding, right? But now they're really tying this directly to the control of a person in our domain. And so...
Yeah, and well, the trouble with that is that the Gnosis seemed almost like a force of nature, almost like a reaction of the universe to certain things that the humans were doing, and that they were unbidden, and that they were almost just beyond the capabilities of a human to control.
Right.
But that being said, I would also have said that the Gnosis were, in a way, being used or channeled in certain ways by people in control, but not necessarily like controlled by people.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure how I feel about that development, or even if this is just, well, I do think I remember them saying that there's only a certain percentage of Gnosis attacks that
41%.
Like 41% that are
Yeah.
patterned like this, or that are being used in this way, and the rest aren't. So I think there's still some more answers there, but
that's a huge percentage. That's almost half of all of them.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm not really trying to say that or offer a criticism of it necessarily. It's just not what I expected, and so I'm kind of just waiting to get more developments on that. So this girl, Almadel, was an eyewitness to some of these Gnosis terrorist attacks, and so she's kind of brought in for investigation. They find out she's a special type of Realian built for an unknown purpose. Right. So Juli's kind of looking after her, and then that lab where they're keeping her is attacked by this Scientia agent called Doctus, who is a freaking beast, apparently.
More powerful than KOS-MOS. That's the part where I was thinking, okay, guys, what are you doing here?
Yeah, just jacks KOS-MOS up, like,
very
badly.
much so. But that was version 2 KOS-MOS. See, now we got version 3 KOS-MOS, and so Doctus doesn't stand a chance now. Right? I think that's how they're going to play it off.
Yeah.
But it's weird that anything was more powerful than KOS-MOS.
Yeah, and like the whole idea of Doctus is kind of interesting. So it's like the real person is sort of commanding this body remotely, right, and attacking.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, a person who's not actually going to die can be very confident. And I guess the body they created is extremely powerful.
Yeah, you can take big risks.
Yeah. So for those of you who have not gone through Pied Piper, Scientia is explained a little bit more in that little story.
Well, but this gave some more background there, though. Like, so Scientia at the time, Melissa, I think, goes and like forms or joins that group, right? But now within this game, we learned that there are millions of members and that they are the biggest group that is in opposition to the UMN.
Yes.
So it's not just some small little band of people. There's a lot of people.
It's essentially the largest rebellion, that there is in the whole Federation. And so in Pied Piper, there was a group called Veritas that had very similar anti-UMN sentiments. And, you know, the group kind of joins forces with them a little bit. And Melissa or whatever her name's supposed to be, she kind of sympathizes and joins with them, but then ends up sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily branching off of it or creating an entirely new thing, but which is Scientia, which becomes sort of the more dominant organization as far as this movement against the UMN, or like the way that the UMN is used within the whole Federation society. It's like central functioning within the government and within the whole galactic civilization. So that was about 100 years before this time. So it has had a lot of time to grow and spread and gain new members. And now it's huge. Now there's a lot of people that are following it. So that's what this group is, and they're after this girl Almadel, right? They come in, KOS-MOS gets beat up by Doctus, and Doctus takes the girl away.
Yeah, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Right. And so Jin and Shion end up going after her and catching up and essentially infiltrating this vessel, this ship that she's on, Doctus, I mean. And they end up getting caught while they're there and brought before the captain, who ends up explaining a whole lot of things, sort of putting doubts into Shion's mind about Vector and the way that they've operated, and a lot of cover-ups that they've done, and a lot of shady stuff that they've been involved in, and, you know, she doesn't want to believe it and whatnot. Jin seems to be a little bit, especially considering the fact that the data that he stole from Miltia, he seems to be more in the know as to how many organizations there are out there that were involved in all of that. Let's see. So I took some notes on some terms here, though. Let's see. Lemegeton. Is that how you say that? Yeah. Is that the correct
Lemegeton is what I would say. But...
That sounds more right to me. Lemegeton. So this Lemegeton is a Gnosis summoning program manufactured by Grimoire Verum. By sending out a special wavelength, this program makes it possible to interfere with the behavior of the Gnosis. Several thousand years ago, it was used by researchers to observe the relationship between the Zohar and the Gnosis. So we're talking several thousand years ago here, not 14 years ago, in this current society when the Gnosis emerged. We're talking about Lost Jerusalem time, right? No. And the thing is that the people who were doing this research at Miltia knew that. They were aware of this, which is why they were testing it again. So several thousand years ago, it was used by researchers to observe the relationship between the Zohar and the Gnosis. However, the experiment failed, causing the space-time anomaly responsible for the disappearance of Lost Jerusalem.
Right.
Lemegeton itself was recovered by Vector, and they escaped Lost Jerusalem. So Vector has existed all the way back to Lost Jerusalem time. It had been safeguarded by them ever since. But when Project Zohar was invoked, it was handed over to the Mizrahi Cerebral Sciences Research Facility. The program was restored by Professor Yoki Mizrahi, who used it as the basis for the Song of Nephilim device. So that is essentially what is happening when that Song of Nephilim plays. It's like it's casting some kind of spell in the form of a program. Right. And I figured I'd let you cover the connection there between the Lemegeton and the lesser Key of Solomon and all that
the
stuff.
lesser Key of Solomon.
Yeah.
Well, it's super fun that the lesser Key of Solomon is called Lemegeton. Well, at least in part. Hold on, let me get my notes here. The lesser Key of Solomon is known as the Lemegeton Clavicula Salomonis. And so the idea being the connection between Lemegeton and the lesser Key of Solomon is one about what you just said, casting spells. The Ars, well, what this is called, the Ars Almadel is the fourth part of the lesser Key of Solomon. And in particular, it's a spell. It's like a talisman. It's like you use the triangles, which is interesting because you know that symbol at the very end of Missing Year. There's that symbol with the triangle and then the circles kind of on top sides, and then there's kind of a design in the middle of it. That's similar to the talismans that people would create using the Ars Almadel. Yeah, and so you have your square. You create the square, then you draw the what's the word for it? There's a word for it, but the what's the Jewish symbol with the Star of David? You draw the Star of David. There's another word for the Star of David, by the way, which is and I'm forgetting. I can't believe I'm forgetting all this stuff. It's the thing at the end of Xenosaga episode 1. The Merkaba. That's it. Merkaba.
Oh, the proto-Merkaba.
Yeah, proto-Merkaba. So Merkaba is the shape of the Star of David is essentially a Merkaba is what it is. Or it's a representation of a Merkaba. I think Merkaba would be 3D. This would be 2D, something like that. Either way. So you essentially you create the Star of David around a circle with or around a square with the circles and pillars, and that was a talisman. And you would write the names of the angels that you were summoning, right? And the idea was that this was supposed to be helpful to people. This was in use a very long time ago, and the Lesser Key of Solomon was sort of like the key to. I mean, as the legend goes, Solomon was able to command the demons and the angels. And so he had the keys, he had the knowledge, and he possessed like the ability to do that. And so a lot of secret writings were circulating after Solomon, of course, saying this is how he did it. These are the words he said, and these are the talismans that he drew. And if you do those, then you'll have his same protection, right? So the fact that you refer to this as casting a spell is exactly what it is. And it's a spell in the form of a song, right? And it's essentially what is being then used to call Song of Nephilim. Out.
Essentially what summons the Gnosis. It's the spell that sort of like initiates this whole process of summoning the Gnosis from the higher numbered domain. Yeah.
Yes. And now that's not in the Lesser Key of Solomon, the higher numbered domain. But they're trying to take the past. This is what I really appreciate about Xenogears and Takahashi and Scientia and all them. That they're taking things from the past and trying to like find a way to make it fit. Not only in modern times, but like well into the future. And the ways that they have determined to do so, I think, are fascinating. It's really fun.
Yeah. We talked about the Lesser Key of Solomon a little bit, both in Xenogears and in Vagrant Story as well. Because in Vagrant Story, your spells are contained within grimoires, these books, right?
The books, yeah.
But we talked a little bit about the Geisha Key in
yes, that's right. The Ars Geisha is like the Ars Almadel. It's a part of the Lesser Key of Solomon. Yeah.
Right. So there's where these terms are coming from. The Ars Geisha, I believe, is the first part of the book. As you said, the Ars Almadel is the fourth part. So there's all these different parts. And I think Geisha is the one that has the names of all the demons in it.
Yeah, 70-something names. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And so a lot of that was referenced.
And cool designs also.
Oh, sure.
Each demon has a symbol associated with it.
Yeah. And I think that actually that might have also been in Final Fantasy Tactics, now that I think about it. But because some of the names of those demons were used in Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh, of course. Final Fantasy loves to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, this is all stuff we've kind of covered before. I mean, I figured we just kind of brush on it, but no need to go to it in detail at this point. I don't feel like.
Sure.
But cool stuff. It's cool to research it. One of these days, I feel like I'm gonna like read that.
Yeah, I was getting into the Ars Almadel today. Yeah. And it's dope. Like, there's cool stuff there, man. And apparently it comes to us. We don't even know how old it is. The earliest version we have was translated from Arabic. And from there, it's like, who really even knows?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there's another entry here on Grimoire Verum himself. Figure we might as well talk about who this guy actually is. He's sort of like the chief antagonist of this game, or of this little web series. Chief technician of Vector's Zohar research project and the programmer that manufactured the Gnosis summoning program, Lemegeton. All other personal data is unknown, as it is thought to have been lost when Lost Jerusalem disappeared. It is assumed that he died at that time. By using his own daughter as a test subject for Lemegeton, he was able to complete the Gnosis summoning program. However, an incident during that experiment caused the Zohar to go out of control. Grimoire is considered to be responsible for the space-time anomaly, which in turn was responsible for the disappearance of Lost Jerusalem. So, it's his fault that all of this happened in the first place, and he was using his own daughter as part of the experiment to complete this program. So now we finally have an answer to who Nephilim is, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. We finally...
Well, I was hoping Nephilim wouldn't just be like a normal person. Like, there's something about Nephilim that lended itself very well towards like an angelic presence, and I don't know. I kind of do know, I guess, sort of where Takahashi is going with this, and it's not necessarily in the direction of Nephilim or of angels at all, I guess. Yeah. And so everything has to be explained in terms of, it was a person, or it is a portion of the Udo as manifested through the UMN, or like a Realian or something like that. It can never be like
an actual
like
freaking
true
angel.
Divinity from a divine realm,
Yeah.
Depending on what Udo is, I still don't know, but I don't think that it's necessarily links up with typical ideas of the divine realm.
Yeah, I was beginning to question, just kind of along the lines of what you're saying here. I was beginning to question how much or how far maybe they will be able to go, knowing they only have one more game here to complete the Xenosaga trilogy. And how much of that is going to have to be altered a little bit or retermed. Now, I do know, or at least I suspect, that back when they were thinking that this was going to be some 6-part epic, I don't suspect that they meant to make Shion and this particular group of characters the main cast through all 6 games. I have a feeling that at some point they were going to pivot to some other time or place or something like that.
Interesting.
Okay. But it
I
does.
Mean, that is, if you look at Xenogears' perfect works, that would make sense to what maybe he wanted to do.
Yeah. And so my assumption is that they're going to, as best as they can, get through the Shion portion of the Xenosaga story by the end of episode 3. And that there probably, as had to be the case, some places where they cut or alter or trim or compact things. And I am just a little bit curious as to whether this was the original concept for Nephilim. Whether she was supposed to be just some girl from Lost Jerusalem. Now, it could very well be that is the case. That is exactly what she was supposed to be. And that she wasn't a supernatural being in the same way that we're suspecting Udu or whatever, drives Udu is, or the Gnosis are, or whatever. Yeah. Some being from this higher number domain that has kind of come here. That is a little bit how it came across, because I remember in the first game, she was saying something like, we can only interact with you for like a very limited time, and so we don't have much
right.
time to try to get our message across in this little encephalon dive. Now that could be just
You know,
because her soul is dead and she's moved on, and so she technically is an angel in that sense. I mean, this is just the soul of a girl who has passed on, right?
Yeah, I totally agree, and that can still work. But you're right. I think what you're saying there with episode 1 is what's coming to mind a little bit. That she was mentioning, it was almost like she was just a projection within Shion's mind of a greater consciousness that was making contact with her.
That's how it felt.
This is the form that it took, right?
Yeah. That was how I was thinking about her too. And so I don't know if that's just me assuming that's where it was going, and so therefore I'm like, maybe this was, it could very well have been the intention from the beginning. I'm not saying anything like that in terms of, it just felt a little bit like a pivot, and maybe it's not. Again, maybe it's not, but it felt that way a little bit for some reason. Anyway, so but that's who she is. She was the girl of this guy Grimoire Verum, who was the original scientist who summoned the Gnosis and created that, again, enormous space-time anomaly. We're talking about a region of space that is so huge it is unfathomable almost, that just sort of disappeared, and Lost Jerusalem was somewhere in there. And so they picked up that research from where he left off, and Joachim Mizrahi continued it, and that led to what happened on Miltia 14 years ago, right? So that's who he is.
You know, the story that we're hearing here is it's so similar to so many of the stories that we've just been hearing throughout these works. Somebody's daughter, I don't want to lose her, and so I'm going to preserve her consciousness in this thing, but then the thing kind of develops its own feelings. Like, this is a recurring theme here over and over, and not just in this game. We've dealt with this theme in in Nier and in certain other games afterwards as well. This is a very interesting theme to explore.
Yeah. Okay, so this next part of the story was pretty interesting because they're doing their sort of analysis on Almadel, right? These are the anti-UMN Scientia people. And Jin sort of enters in the middle of this analysis, and the girl starts like freaking out. She is scared of him. She's like, she visibly changes in his presence as he starts approaching her. And doing that sort of awakens a power in her. She sort of has this, crazy awakening where she loses control. They lose control of her. Shion tries to interfere to like help or protect her and ends up falling unconscious. And
yeah, that's right.
By the end of this, the girl just disappears from the lab, basically. Yeah. And so Jin...
But it was Jin, right? She was scared of Jin.
Yes.
And that was unexpected.
Yeah. When she saw his face, that's when like this whole thing began going sideways. So he goes back and reports this. They're trying to help Shion because she's essentially totally unconscious. Jill is there, and they're trying to like revive her. They can't figure out a way. So it's like, we got to do an encephalon dive. And Jin ends up going back to Scientia and recruiting their help for this. And then Doctus sort of like, sets it all up and prepares to send him in there because he needs to go to a very special area of the UMN, which was called, let me remember the term, it was Ars something.
Is Ars Nova.
Ars Nova.
Which by the way means Ars actually has relationship to art or something like that, but it's the new art would be it, something like that. The new connection.
Yes.
Which I didn't think was actually a very good name for this place.
Yeah, again,
like art nouveau is how the French would say it now, and that's a specific reference to like contemporary art designs.
Right. But this is Ars Nova is a special place, like a top secret region within the UMN. But
yeah, it's not in reality as we reference it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of designed to be a prison, right?
Yeah.
it's a place where they just trap people's consciousnesses, and this guy's just like made himself at home, and he's just like, hey, I like it here. Which I think is great. I thought it was wonderful.
I'm going to conduct my Gnosis Terrorism from this little prison they've built for me.
Exactly. And no one can get me, and yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, so Vector has created this little spot in the UMN to be the prison for Grimoire Verum, who was, I don't want to call him responsible. Obviously, Vector itself and going all the way up the chain there to Wilhelm is responsible. But he was blamed as being the leading scientist on this for what happened there. So they built a prison for him here in Vector. Vector built a prison here for him inside the UMN. And so Jin is going into that area because this is where Nephilim, well, she's not really Nephilim. It's Almadel. But she's called Nephilim by Grimoire Verum. He gave her that name sort of temporarily, right? So he's calling her Nephilim. This is what created the confusion we were talking about earlier. But so Almadel's consciousness and Shion's consciousness are now trapped inside of this Ars Nova where Grimoire Verum is. So Jin is trying to get into there, and he goes to Doctus to help him do that. So we cut into the UMN, into Ars Nova. And you get this nice scene between Almadel and Shion. Shion's, trying to help her. We're starting to see some flashes at this point back to her sitting with her in what looks like a hospital room and like next to the bed with some flowers, showing that they had a connection when Shion was younger. Grimoire Verum comes in and basically takes Almadel away. Jin shows up. A bunch of freaking macrophages attack them. Doctus comes in and helps fight them off while they go pursue Grimoire Verum. They sort of reach the area where he's at, and this is where he reveals essentially, because he had been leading Almadel along this whole time. She doesn't have her, like she's an amnesiac, right? She's lost her memories.
Yes, and she's also a Realian, right?
Right.
And she was just created to be experimented upon. That's her whole purpose of living, so that he could accomplish some other task. But he kept dragging her along by saying, oh, I will reveal to you your true name, and I will restore your memories if you just do what I say, basically.
Yeah. This reminds me a little bit of that, I don't know if you'd call it a psalm or not, from game we just played, Planescape Torment, right? Where there's the 3 wishes, and it's like the first wish is to know who I am. The second wish is to forget. We get a little bit of that kind of thing going on here, where Almadel wants to know who she is, but they realize that when she's told that she was simply a body that was constructed for the purpose of giving Nephilim's consciousness to her, right? That's not something you want to know all of a sudden. So it's like, it's better that you can't
handle that
your memories. Right.
You know what's weird though, and I was thinking about this at first because she starts freaking out, and I'm like, "Why did you say that? You're ruining your own experiment. Are you stupid?" But my thinking on that is that she wasn't programmed to be this way, and typically people can just speak frankly in front of Realians, and they tend not to care much. It's just a couple of them that seem to have developed this ability to, this first person experience of consciousness that all of a sudden they don't like being talked about in this way, and I guess without knowing that she had developed that type of consciousness, he was just speaking candidly, and it just made her lose her mind. And I'm thinking, he probably shouldn't do that. Just as a precaution, never bring that up in front of them, that they're purposeful-less machines.
Yeah. It's like he had told her, because I kind of thought it was clever how when she would ask him directly, are you going to restore my memories and give me my name? He would say something in response like, I will give you all these pleasant memories, or something like that, right? So he's telling her a half-truth, mostly a lie with that, right? It's not her own memories. He's going to give her Nephilim's consciousness and Nephilim's memories.
Right, and then the name will be Nephilim.
Right. But you're right. Why not just tell her, here come your memories, get ready for them.
Right.
Instead, he basically reveals, no, you're just a bodiless or a soulless husk for my true daughter's consciousness. Here she comes, get ready to receive. And then he acts surprised when she starts rejecting the memories.
Yes, of course. She's like, you mean it's not me? Now, he had known her for a while. He should have known to tread carefully with this right. girl.
So she starts rejecting them. So she's not receiving the consciousness the way that he was wanting her to. And so he starts getting upset.
So just vibes of Nier, like all over the place.
Totally.
I thought it was wonderful. But also, this was like his life's work. Like he had been waiting. He's been in prison for a while, and
2,000 years, in fact.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't care because it'll happen when it happens. And he finally thinks it's going to happen, and then it doesn't. Oh man. And he had basically become disconnected from all of humanity. He didn't actually care about what the damage was going to be.
Yeah.
If he did this, right? It's just he just cared about seeing his daughter again, and he was like, he's so disconnected from the world that it was no problem for him. He didn't really see an issue with it. And then the whole thing falls apart, like right in front of his eyes. Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah, this to me was kind of the easiest, most obvious tie-in to the conversation we had last week with Keith about life extension and learning how to let go of your attachments, right?
Yeah,
and if you can't do that,
this game,
if you live in this sort of terror mindset about death, whether it's about your own death or whether it's especially about the death of a loved one or something like that, that can just keep you. I think that I had brought up the analogy of grasping or gripping something so tight that you actually kill it, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So that's kind of what he has done here. He has grasped onto this idea of reviving his dead daughter for so long, and he has gripped it so tightly that he actually ends up destroying it himself. And this is kind of the whole point of what we went over there, was living your life to its fullest, living your life as an open individual, not as a closed and cold person, but as an open and warm person who gives your love to those around you, but kind of in this sort of Buddhist sense, is not attached to this world, to the things, to the people that are in your life, knowing there's going to come a time when you're going to lose literally everything you have in your life. Nothing.
But they always say you can't take it with you, right?
Nothing lasts forever. Whether it goes first or whether you go first, it's going to be lost at some point. And so living with this mindset of coming to an acceptance of that, and while you have it, not gripping it so tightly that you lose all the meaning and love and joy that you could have had with your time with it by killing it while you have it. And that is essentially what this man has done. He has totally detached himself, like you said, from
he's
humanity.
Existing only in the UMN. Like he doesn't even exist in a physical sense anymore. And so it's just he's a head floating in space. It's not a body living a real life.
Yes. And so his mindset has been completely, obsessively single-minded on this one thing that he wanted done. And then the time comes, it doesn't happen, and it's like, now what do you do at this point? Right? But he does, as his consciousness is being destroyed here within the UMN, as Almadel turns into a Gnosis and starts singing the Song of Nephilim, which is going to summon all these Gnosis to resonate through the entire freaking universe and destroy everything. He does see his daughter's spirit again. And she had asked Shion to help with this. She's like, my father has, he doesn't realize what he's doing, or he doesn't care about who he's hurting at this point. Please help out with this, do something about this. Right. So Nephilim does very briefly, make contact with him and everything like that. And he sort of goes peacefully. But now we got to deal with the fact that Almadel is transformed into a Gnosis.
So Jin is like, we just have to kill it, right? And
Yeah.
Shion is upset about that. But it turns out that they kind of had to do both. Like they did have to slice it open, but also Shion was right that the girl was still alive within the Gnosis. The transformation wasn't complete.
Yeah. And the reason she's so adamant about not killing her is because she had just finally had her repressed memories restored, where she remembered who this girl was. The fact that it was her own father, Jin and Shion's father. What was his name again? It was like Soma or something like that. I can't remember.
Suo.
That was it. That was it.
But I'll tell you what, I have been curious about the father ever since Xenosaga episode 1, where it seemed as though somebody had long ago pre-programmed Shion to restrict access to the Y data, and I'm like, this is why Shion. Anyways, it's interesting. I know nothing about this, but the fact that it was the parents is just like, man, I know I've been suspicious about these people this whole time. And who is Shion? I still am very curious about that. And the parents will have the answer. But one of the reasons why the girl was so afraid when she saw Jin was, I think, because Jin resembled his father. He looks like his father.
Yep,
and she, one of her, memories outside of the UMN, I guess, is of Jin's father doing those experiments, right?
Yeah. And so it's a really interesting dynamic they've set up here. Like Almadel had this connection with this girl, but this girl's father was the one doing all this horrible stuff to her. It's a real complicated situation, but she had a real connection with her, and she really felt bonded. And she had a real friendship with Shion. And Shion really was like the one singular shining light in all of this darkness and pain and suffering that she was going through. Because, her father was really pushing the experiments. It was like, we've got deadlines to meet here. We can't keep Dr. Mizrahi waiting. Like, it's like, well, I don't know if she can take anymore. It's like, no, just keep going. So they're putting her through significant pain. And so this is almost a torture kind of situation happening here. And Shion was the only spots of relief during that experience. And so when Shion realizes this, she's got probably the guilt of her father having been responsible for all this pain. And she feels the desire to want to do something. And then Nephilim shows up and says, no, she has to actually die. It requires that she dies at this point. The Song of Nephilim can't be stopped unless she's killed.
I think Shion kept asking her, like, can you stop it now? Can you just stop the thing? And she's like, I can't.
So now this is the second time, counting what happened with Cecily and Kath in Xenosaga Episode 2, where Shion has wanted to not do something, sacrifice these Realian kids that she had friendships and relationships with, where the only answer was no, that this is exactly what Nephilim is asking you to do. It's exactly what Fabronia is asking you to do. Kill these kids and release them from this, this system that they've been put into, and in which they're contributing to this ongoing Gnosis destruction of the universe.
Yeah,
and
death is the release, and that is actually very Gnostic, just in general.
Sure, that's actually a really great point. For those of you who have not been around since our Xenogears podcast series, we jumped into a lot more of that side of things there, right? The Gnostic interpretation of Christianity as a religion, which basically posited Jehovah, the God of the Old Testament, as a demiurge or a corrupted God here within the material universe. And in the Gnostic interpretation, anything material at all is corrupted.
It's bad.
It's corrupt. Yeah. And there are different interpretations of whether corruption is completely evil or not, depending on which Gnostic branch you're talking about.
True.
But
generally you want to escape the material world and go to the true world, which is kind of
the spiritual plane, the pleroma, where the monad, who is like the true, benevolent, purely spiritual God in their interpretation, where he resides, right?
Right.
And so essentially what you're saying is correct, and I think it plays into this death for these Realians is that sort of escape or release. Well, escape is probably the right word, but you used a different word. What is it that you said? You said it was a release or something like that.
It was something like that, to release. Yeah, that death is a release from the material world.
Yes.
I can't remember the word, but
but essentially
people
that.
can rewind.
Essentially that. Yeah, that.
Yes.
The material world is something you're trapped in, and that death is the sort of release from that corruption, from that evil that sort of is inherent in the material universe, to go back to the spiritual pure world and become a part of the monad again, right? Is essentially, I think, where some of the inspiration for the way that Xenosaga and Xenogears explores death comes from, and the way that it explores how the powers of God are used and corrupted within the material world. Because often what powers something that these humans have created, whether it's the proto-omega from Xenosaga episode 2, or whether we're talking about the Deus system in Xenogears, right? These things are basically godlike. They're almost like these demiurges that have this power source nobody really understands.
Exactly. It gives you incredible power, but it's based on something that you don't understand, therefore is almost immediately misused. And this is the curse of humanity. We do this all the time.
Yeah. The curse of the material plane, even, of beings that
unintended
grew
consequences. And it comes from an inability to predict the future or to account for all of the material and forces that exist in the world.
Right.
We just can't. So unexpected things happen, and it's like, whoops.
So, yeah, I think that we're starting to see a lot of those types of concepts, which we talked more at length in Xenogears. I think those may start becoming more and more apparent as we move into Xenosaga 3 here.
Yeah, we'll see.
And I think that you're right on the money by saying there's a little bit of a Gnostic interpretation about death and release and that sort of thing that may be touched on here.
Because in the quote that I read at the last episode of Xenosaga episode 2, it does mention that, yes, he draws upon Christianity, but not exactly Christianity, and certainly not like the Christianity that like we're familiar with. Like there's something different going on here.
Or Orthodox Christianity may not be the direct and only sort of source we're looking at here. And if Xenogears is anything to be drawn from in terms of where this may or may not be going, then certainly Gnostic is more the inspiration there. But all right, so yeah, Almadel has to choose to do it herself, though. So it's not just that she has to die; she has to like willingly sacrifice herself. So we got a little bit of a, you can see, savior type archetype going on there, perhaps as well. She chooses to do that, and Shion is just totally losing it, just breaking down at this point. And I think this is where we can see some of her attachments, and maybe some of the things that she needs to work through in terms of her wrestling with the concepts of death, and losing other people that she cares about in particular. So she's lost her parents. We learned that in Xenosaga's episode 2, that she doesn't want to even go visit their graves, right? They're not even really there.
Which makes them very interesting to me,
Yeah. And then with these Realian girls who were her friends, I mean, she has a very, very hard time, understandably, most people do, with losing people to death and the ability to let go of that attachment, right? Now, I thought it was...
And then, of course, what's his name? Kevin? And the first KOS-MOS, what was that called? Proto something or other?
Oh, the prototype.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So Kevin was killed by that original
Yeah.
KOS-MOS prototype, and she's been struggling with that too. She's had a lot of people close to her die in her life.
And it seems like we're in a futuristic world where, other than the Gnosis invading everything, death is not as common here, right, as it maybe is in our current world or something like that. Like, this is way in the future.
Yeah.
Advancements are through the roof, yet she still is living in this world where everyone around her is dying. And it would probably be even harder on her for that reason.
Quick and I think very important correction from Carnage Panda in the Discord. It was not the prototype. That's not what the original KOS-MOS design that ended up killing Kevin was. And I think we talked about this in Xenosaga episode 1 as well. Because prototype assumes it's not finished yet.
Okay.
What that was called was the archetype.
Archetype, that was it. That's right, the archetype.
And so it's almost like
love it.
That was the real KOS-MOS. Now they've been trying to build it back up to being that again. Right? It's like
very cool.
Shion ended up like blowing KOS-MOS's head off in Xenosaga episode 1, that cutscene, right? So that was the KOS-MOS archetype that she killed. And so it's like since then they've almost been like building prototypes that are leading up to the restoration of the true KOS-MOS archetype.
Yeah.
So thank you for that correction. Now I'm remembering that distinction. Appreciate that, Carnage Panda. Perfect. And so anyway, KOS-MOS ends up showing up in the middle of this scene, by the way. She's in a new exoskeleton, like a more advanced form. And
they didn't just upgrade her firmware.
No.
They upgraded her image.
Yeah, so she's a stronger version, again, like we said, working up back to this archetype full power version of her that has been prophesied to do battle with Udu at some point here in the future. And she's essentially what helps to like cut Almadel out of the Gnosis and sort of like get her, out of that nosification that was happening. She hadn't fully nosified just yet. But anyways, she ends up sacrificing herself. Jin, I thought it was hilarious that Jin just like smacks her in the face.
That was unexpected. They don't do that in games anymore.
No, especially an older brother to like a sister or a man to a woman. It's just, not something. But I liked the sentiment
knocks her
of the
into
scene.
Her senses, right?
Yes. I liked the sentiment of the scene, though, and I like that Jin and Shion are getting closer as we're going through the story. It's like they were in a really bad place at the beginning of Xenosaga episode 2, and it's like they've had more time together. They're understanding each other better. They've had some nice heart-to-hearts, and this is another one of those where he sort of like, rouses her back, because she is essentially willing to just like give it all up right there. She's like, whatever, I don't care anymore. Just kill me at this point. And he sort of wakes her up and brings her back to her senses. So I felt that was a nice scene. And then essentially that brings us to the end. They escape the UMN, or that particular sector of the UMN, the Ars Nova, as it's sort of being destroyed. And
I did want to like throw some symbolic like readings into that. The image just isn't that clear. But there's an angel with 4 wings, like a golden statue of an angel with 4 wings in front of something like the Zohar, right?
Yeah.
And it's in what looks like something along the lines of like a medieval, Christian Catholic cathedral with like gold and all that stuff. I couldn't really read much else into it. I couldn't tell if the angel was clothed or was holding like a person. I couldn't really tell. But yeah, there's some symbolism there, which is so weird given Ars Nova. I don't know why exactly they called it Ars Nova. I never really was able to figure that one out.
Yeah. But yeah, they get out, and then essentially we get the story wraps up. Shion shares why she leaves Vector. She got demoted, but that's not the reason. The reason is because Vector's shady, and without even saying goodbye to KOS-MOS, she takes off, which is very
she just leaves.
She just leaves, and so when we pick up in Xenosaga episode 3, she's going to be working with Scientia at this point, and that's where we'll be going from there. So that hopefully will bridge a gap that will be really important. And for those of you who picked up Xenosaga episode 3 back in the day, and had no idea what happened. There's a huge chunk of the story is missing here. Well, this is what it was. Missing year.
I wonder how many people actually saw this, how widely it was distributed, or how successful they were.
Well,
in getting this in front of people.
This was on like the Japanese website, and it was only in Japanese. It was never like officially translated.
Right.
So it was only something fans could translate. And I think it was only up there for a limited time. It's not like they left this up there for like years and years and years. I think even it was sometime like right when Xenosaga 3 came out, from what I remember reading about this, it was taken down from the website. So even like the
weird.
Japanese version was gone. And so it was only like in like web archives that anyone could even access it. And then it was later on that a fan did the translation that, you and I saw.
It sounds like they didn't want people to watch it.
Why else, right? Like, why would you?
Exactly.
Anyway, it's so, this whole series is so cursed, but.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have some clarifications again here in the Discord, and I'm going to have to lift this to be able to read because it's too dark. The missing year stuff is actually in the Xenosaga 3 database as well as Pied Piper. So they added that into the database for episode 3. So a lot of that story you would have been able to find there. Right?
I see. Okay.
They do reference it after Xenosaga 3's prologue too, says Mix. And then Carnage Panda, it's not the full flash animation, but it does tell you what happens. And then Mick says, I think by the time Xenosaga 3 came around, Takahashi and his team were wanting to move on to something else. They were ready to start Monado, End of the World or whatever, which became Xenoblade Chronicles. But yeah. It was a really interesting little episode. I really liked the bits at the end. Basically this whole sort of climactic scene in the Ars Nova between Grimoire Verum and Almadel, and then the whole like she's turning into a Gnosis, she's nosifying, she rejects the memories. This whole section I thought was a really fascinating scene, and I really like that they're sort of repairing the relationship between Jin and Shion. I like where that's going. And it sets us up, I think, properly for what's going to come up in Xenosaga Episode 3, which will be where we continue next week.
Next week?
Yep. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
When people die, when she dies, she turns into salt, which I think we did bring up in Episode 1.
We did.
But I had forgotten that was the thing. And so... you can become a Gnosis, you can become salt, or you can become like enlightened after you die. Like there's like a few different options for you, I guess, for certain of these people. But it was interesting that she was a Realian, and then she became a Gnosis from Realian, not from being a human.
Yeah.
And then that she still turns into salt, even though she's a Realian. Anyways, very interesting stuff. But it was, like you mentioned, self-sacrifice, all done of her own will. And of course, with the words of, you can't hold on to it forever, it's okay to let things go.
Yeah.
And with that, she turned into her pillar of salt, which is a slightly different version of the salt that is referenced in the Bible. In the Bible, it's kind of like, this is a bad thing. And in this one, it's like, well, this is okay, right? And you get a peaceful kind of feeling about it. I really liked this. I really did. The story in general, I thought was very good.
Yeah. Short and sweet and compact, but effective in the moments where it needed to be.
Very much so.
And the bodies of all the Gnosis are basically composed of straight salt. So that was kind of what was revealed back when you first went on to the Durandal with Junior. And he had like that whole room, remember?
Right. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Where they had like the bodies of Gnosis in there.
Yeah.
And there was that one woman who had been Gnosified like an extremely long time ago or something like that. Yeah. So that was where that was revealed. Anyway, that's it for A Missing Year. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let us know what you thought about that little flash animation story in the comments. And next week will be Xenosaga Episode 3. We'll see you then. Peace out.
All right. Peace.